Welcome, everyone. Now I know what it's like to be a teacher, right? Welcome, everyone. I'm Katie Stodgel, and I'm the president of Sister Cities, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our 12th annual International Breakfast. Thank you for joining us to learn more about our program. First, I want to thank our sponsors, whose support allows us the opportunity to host the fundraising event. Cannon, Virginia, Mellon Street Creative, I saw Claire walk in just a second ago, and PMA Architecture. Second, I want to thank CNU for hosting us, and CNU Provost, Dr. Dowdy, and the faculty of CNU University for this lovely location, and this new screen. Everybody saw their new screen. Over the years, Sister Cities has grown to have a supportive and meaningful relationship with CNU, and for that we are thankful. And I want to offer a warm welcome to our keynote speaker, Mr. Jae Sinnett. Everybody knows his voice. Now we'll get to see what he looks like, right? So, Jay, on behalf of Sister Cities, we are thrilled to have you brave the tunnel traffic, as you told me this morning. And on behalf of Sister Cities, welcome. We are also honored to have with us this morning the following elected officials. Congressman Bobby Scott from the 3rd Congressional District. Let's see, is Monty Mason here? Yes, I'm sorry, State Senator Monty Mason from the 1st District. Delegate David Yancey, I saw David walk in. Councilwoman Sharon Scott, is Sharon here? Yeah, there's Sharon. Dr. Pat Woodbury. Councilwoman Pat, she's a councilwoman. Councilman David Jenkins. I don't know. There he is. And from Hampton, my friend, Councilwoman Eleanor Weston Brown. School board member Gary Hunter. And Newport News School Board member Shelley Simons. I also want to recognize the following city leaders. Our city manager, Cindy Rolfe. Is she here? Okay, well, she's not. And I know our city clerk, Mabel Washington Jenkins, is here. Since our first sistering in 1982 with the city of Nagagawa, Japan, Sister Cities has been led by a strong and committed group of volunteers dedicated to our mission of, and this is important, this is our mission, building and strengthening international cooperation, understanding and development between the citizens of the city of Newport News and those of the world. At this time, I'd like to recognize and thank my fellow Sister Cities board members, the folks who invited you to today's breakfast, for their leadership and support. Vice President Shelley Simons, where's Shelley? Treasurer Colin Farquhar. Secretary Angela King. There's Angela. Our immediate past president, Bud Curtis. Councilwoman Sharon Scott. Councilwoman Dr. Pat Woodbury. Vicki Hankey. Is Vicki here? Nope. Sylvia Hunter. Oh, there's Vicki. Sylvia Hunter. Cleater Jones. Is Cleater here? No. Oh, there's Cleater. Fred Coleman. Lynn Lambert. Chow Yu Liu. Did we see Chow Yu? Maybe? Okay. Louis Martinez. Louis Martinez. Jim Taylor. And Lindsay Wagner. Additionally, we are fortunate to have several past board members attending today, and I would like them to stand so we can thank them for laying the foundation for all that we do. Come on. Lastly, I want to thank Kate Helwig, our executive director. She is probably our most passionate advocate and always gives 110%. And everything she does is always about making our organization better. So I want to thank you, Kate. So I now invite my good friend Melissa Goodson, who I'm glad she's after me because she's very good, and my neighbor. She's an elder at Hilton Presbyterian Church to lead us in the invocation.
Thank you. It's great to be among friends. What a beautiful gathering this is. It's indeed a lovely room, and I eagerly know from experience that this will be a delicious breakfast. But what's most beautiful to me is knowing the kind of people who are here this morning. I recognize quite a few of you, but even if you and I are meeting for the first time, I can confidently say this about you. You are, at heart, an optimist. You generally believe that people everywhere have a deep capacity for goodness and kindness. You have an abiding hope that our future can and should be peace-filled and mutually beneficial. You're curious and open to other cultures. Despite outward appearances, deep inside, you're an adventurer, brave enough to go beyond your comfort zone. Because you're here, I know that you're generous and share your time, money, and unique skills with others. Like Sister Cities founder, President Eisenhower, you recognize the cost of peace through military means. You understand that true, global, neighborly peace is built with hospitality and the exchange of ideas and experience, conversation by conversation, and person to person. You also believe that what threatens peace the most is ignorance, fear, and greed. Because you're all basically like this, I invite you to sit back and relax this morning, knowing you are among friends. For all that we hold in common, you each bring something unique and necessary to this organization. Sister Cities' mission of peace through citizen diplomacy requires that we communicate our goodwill and share who we are in lots of different ways. Some of you have made beds, welcomed folks at the airport, arranged dinners, and opened your homes. Some of you have traveled in a delegation or have helped a student be able to discover what the world holds. You may have worked behind the scenes to support the Swallows Rest Tea House, the Global Bee, or the French Conversation Hour. Perhaps you're the one who imaginatively found a way to showcase or represent what it means to come from Newport News in this area. The language of diplomacy is more than words. It's the sharing of our region's music and art, our economic successes, and our mutual concerns. You're not simply representing yourselves, but also the companies you work for, the industries that can mutually benefit each other, the schools you attend, and the local governments you serve. So again, I say, what a beautiful gathering this is. Remembering all that we have to celebrate and be grateful for here, would you please join me in bowing your head as we ask for God's grace and blessing on the work of this organization and on the gift of this meal. God of peace and loving relationships, we thank you for this opportunity to gather here today and see your grace in our global community. We ask for your blessing on the students who will be traveling to Germany next week. and for those who will be visiting us from China in July. Make fruitful our various efforts at creating peace through understanding each other. Bless all the hands who have grown, transported, prepared, and served this food. By this shared meal, help us to remember how connected we are to one another and to you. Amen.
Good morning, or guten Morgen, should I say. My name is Christina Willett. I am the German teacher at Menschville High School, and later this month, actually in a week and a half, I will be leading a delegation of the 13 Newport News High School students to Germany, our sister city, Greifswald, for a 2-week exchange. This will be my 4th exchange with sister cities and the third exchange leading Sister Cities youth. I participate in Sister Cities really because as a teacher, a language teacher, it's great to teach them those few key words, and they'll leave 10 years from now and say, oh, I remember how to say, can I go to the bathroom? But that's great and all. The exchange program allows me to really just connect with some of these students who want to do a little bit more than ask, where's the bathroom? And since I've been doing this, I can see that in the students, and they come back to me with stories that just make me proud to be an educator for foreign language. So at this time, I would like to read a brief statement of a mother of one of our current delegates. So this is about Kylie Lakin. Kylie joined Sister Cities Club led by Madame Flowers, who's the French teacher at Warwick, 3 years ago when she entered her freshman year at Warwick. Since then, she has tried to participate in as many of the activities as possible. In March of 2018, our family hosted our first exchange student from Japan. This past spring, Kylie traveled on the youth exchange to Saint-Nazaire, France. In my opinion, the trip was probably one of the most character-building experiences of her life. I was worried that she would be shy and intimidated by staying with a family that she didn't know. But what happened was the complete opposite. She took in every aspect of the trip and flourished. She came back more confident, secure, and social, and intrigued by the differences in the cultures. When it came time to host the German exchange students in April, Kylie planned out the whole week. She lined up a ton of activities with groups of fellow high school students so the German delegates could experience as much as possible while they were here. Sister Cities has had such a positive impact on Kylie's life. So at this time, I would like to invite Kylie Lakin to the stage. Come up, Kylie Lakin. Kylie will be traveling with me to Greifswald later this month, and I'm pleased to announce that Kylie has been chosen as the recipient of this year's Sister Cities $500 travel scholarship. So congratulations, Kylie. Okay, can I be in it too? Okay. Thank you. Congratulations.
Oh, and at this time, I would like to invite Dr. Reimer he's the director of the music program here at CNU, to introduce our guest speaker.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Christopher Newport. Well, it is my honor today to introduce to you our guest speaker, Jae Sinnett. Jae is a consummate drummer, composer, and band leader who has collaborated with internationally renowned jazz artists such as Branford and Ellis Marsalis, Joe Henderson, Freddie Hubbard, Chuck Mangione, Charlie Bird, Herb Ellis, Chico Freeman, Arthur Blythe, and many, many more. Jae has produced 15 albums, the first of which, Obsession, was released in 1986. His album, Listen, released in 1997, went to the #1 spot on the Gavin Jazz Charts radio. Released in 2005, his album, The Senate Hearings, was the first in which he wrote and arranged every composition, and was also his first album to debut at #1 on the national jazz radio charts. Jae's CD, It's Telling, A Drummer's Perspective, was released in 2008 and became his most played album on Pandora. Jae's 13th album, Subject to Change, was released in August of 2014 and debuted at the highest spot on the Jazz Week radio chart. In 2016, Jae released his critically acclaimed album, 0 to 60, that reached #1 on the National Jazz Week radio chart and stayed in the top 50 for 20 weeks. Jae's first performance, an instructional video, Musical Drumming Concepts, was released in 2001. This video highlights his compositions, philosophical teaching skills, and drumming in various styles, meters, and straight and swing eighth note concepts. Jae has written over 250 compositions and has scored music for 5 documentaries, one of which, John Bigger's Stories of Illumination, was aired on PBS. Jae's dream of having his trio perform with the Virginia Symphony was realized on October 10th, 2014, right here at the Ferguson Center for the Arts. Jae is in his 29th year as a jazz producer and host for NPR affiliate WHRV FM 89.5 in Norfolk, Virginia. Jae hosts the popular jazz show Sinnett in Session, Monday through Thursday evenings from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m., and Sunday afternoons from 1 to 5 p.m. He also hosts the R&B Chronicles, heard Friday evenings from 7 to 8 p.m. His Sinnett in Session jazz radio show is one of the highest fundraising and revenue-producing 4-hour jazz shows in history. At the 2018 Jazz Week Summit in San Jose, California, Jae was awarded the prestigious Scott Willis Jazz Impact Award. As a jazz educator, Jae taught theory, history, and percussion, and directed the big band and jazz combos at the Governor's School for the Arts for 8 years, and served as an instructor of jazz at Christopher Newport University. Jae attended Norfolk State and Old Dominion as a music major, and for over 20 years has served as a Sonar drums and Sabian cymbals artist. He is a touring clinician and music educator, conducting master classes at many universities, and appears as a guest artist with ensembles performing his compositions. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to present to you now our keynote speaker, the voice of jazz in Hampton Roads, Mr. Jae Sinnett.
I think I've ever heard it presented like that. Yeah. Made me nervous coming up here. It's like, who is this guy? Wow. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me be your guest speaker this morning. I have to, it's like, man, I'm nervous about this. Why am I nervous about this? And I figured it out because I'm used to talking to people I can't see. I look great on the radio, don't I? Right? But, I wrote a bunch of notes, but knowing me, I'm not going to read these notes because I'm a jazz musician and we like to improvise, but I'm not going to keep you too long. I will say that I have a lot of respect for people who can function coherently at this time of the morning. I'm not one of those people, you know. I am about as nocturnal as you can get. Right now I'm on about 4 hours of sleep. It's been an interesting week because earlier this week I came down with food poisoning. And so Tuesday and Wednesday I was, real kind of out there. And yesterday I started feeling better. And this morning I'm a little, but I'm okay. But it's the 4 hours sleep thing, And it's interesting because when you're nocturnal, no matter how early you try to go to bed, it doesn't work. Even if you're tired, you just stay up, So I got to sleep last night probably about 1:15, and then woke up at 5 o'clock this morning, right? Left my house at 6:10 because the traffic was clear, the tunnels were clear according to the announcement, and then I get on 64, Monitor Merrimack blocked. And we've all sat in that mess, right? It's really good to see friends, dignitaries, educators, artists, a lot of musicians here, some good friends that I've had the opportunity to perform with over the years. I want to, say that it's really good to see everybody, and I'm so grateful and blessed that you invited me in to come and speak to you. Jazz is a language. It's an interesting language. And I like to tell my students that if you hear a language like French or Italian and you don't understand it, but you still appreciate the inflection, you still appreciate how it moves and how it makes you feel, that's jazz, because you hear jazz. How many of you, by show of hands, listen to my Send It In Session radio show? Wow, okay. That makes up my audience. Thank you so much. All 19 of you, thank you very much. And think about for a moment what you hear when you hear jazz. Jazz primarily is an instrumental art form. Yes, there's singing, but it's primarily an instrumental art form. And you don't necessarily have to understand jazz to appreciate it. It has to make you feel a certain way. That language, like I can hear somebody speak French. I don't speak French, I know some French words, but I love the inflection of the language. I love to hear people speak. I don't care that I don't understand what they say. And that's kind of like where you have to get to in a place to understand what we do as jazz artists and how we play our instrument, how we play the music. There's playing the instrument and then there's playing the music. You learn how to play the instrument, then you have to learn how to play the music. But this instrumental, I think classical musicians go through this as well because most of the music is instrumental. It's more structured than jazz in terms of composed music, but it's still nevertheless a language. And certain melodic passages reach you. You don't necessarily understand the notes involved and the succession of notes and the melodic passages, or you don't necessarily understand the harmony. Harmony, two or more notes played at the same time. And I'm also a chef, and I like to equate, I teach a lot of times when I'm doing lectures on jazz, I equate food with jazz, and I'll explain this in a moment because it's part of the language. And I say because I know people who don't like jazz, all right? But I don't know anyone that doesn't like to eat. Anybody here doesn't like good food? No, you all like good food. But let's say you take a piece of salmon, the fish, right? By itself, that's the theme, that's the melody. I'm personally not a big fan of salmon, so I have to put some clothes on it. The clothes would be the harmony. So I might make a honey pecan citrus glaze to go over that piece of salmon. So those ingredients make up the harmony. And the harmony is designed to enhance the melody, or you can take away from the melody. Now the cooking of the salmon would be the what? The rhythm. Now you can overcook it, you can cook it too quickly, you can undercook it. It's not going to be that good. So all three of these things, the melody, harmony, and rhythm, have to play in unison to make something very interesting and musical. And that's kind of the way I like to teach people who don't play jazz, just to give them an idea how that works with harmony, melody, and rhythm. Language. It's an instrumental language. Now, when my group had the opportunity to perform in Europe in, I think it was 2017. We started in France. And one of the things I noticed with talking with students, I gave a few master classes over there, talking with some of the students over there and working with them. It's interesting with a lot of the students over there because For example, the universities over there, many of the universities in different countries, they don't have dorms for the students. So the students are very integrated within their communities. Like they would get an apartment or rent a room or something like that, where the students over here in the States, the majority, I would say, have dorms on the campuses. So they would have to leave and then go somewhere to be a part of that community. But when you're actually living in it, you know, right down the street, you can walk down the street and hear musicians play. You can have these discussions with them. So they're more integrated in that scene. That's very important for artistic majors, I think, because a lot of the education you get as a performing artist is not going to be in the classroom. So that was one observation I had. Another significant observation I had with the students over there, they seem to be more interested in the craft of what we American artists do. American artists, once they go over there, they're more interested in the culture. Right? I'm not sure if I'm making any sense when I say this, but I thought about that. The craft versus the culture. See, we have the Grand Canyon and Busch Gardens and the 50-foot tall statues of Paul Bunyan. They have the Louvre and the original Colosseum. Right? So they see and live within that centuries old historical architectural beauty and history over there. See, we don't have that. So when the American students go over there, we want to see these things. To them, it's like, yeah, we see it all the time. We want to learn how to play your music. Okay? Now, the language. Jazz is a universal language. It's spoken, performed, played all over the world. But what's interesting, here's something else, another observation. Jazz, they learn, if you live in Japan, if you live in Germany, if you live in France, if you live in the Netherlands, wherever you are over there, they learn the improvisation. They learn technically what we're doing. They learn the theory. They learn the conceptual directions of jazz. They learn all these things that we do as jazz artists here from the United States. But one thing that they lack over there, the blues, the soul. See, that's what we grew up on. I can remember when I was 4 or 5 years old, hearing Mahalia Jackson in my house, hearing Ray Charles, hearing Aretha Franklin, and then into my teenage years, hearing Motown. Not because I wanted to, I mean, that was just put on us. That's what we were exposed to, and many of you were too. See, the European students, they weren't exposed to that. See, but if you talk to many of the blues rock band, or the rock bands from Europe, the European rock bands out of England, what's the first thing they talk about? The United States blues. That's the thing that baffles them and intrigues them the most. How do we make the music feel the way we do? See, it's something you have to live. I debated long and hard about this. Somebody asked me, can you teach someone how to swing? I used to think so. I used to have this noble thought as an educator. Can you teach every student? I'm not so sure about that now. I used to think, yes, it's a given, but some just don't get it. But one of the most difficult things, like in my clinics, I talk about the 3 techniques: the physical, the emotional, and the intellectual. Too much music is taught from the physical and the intellectual. The hardest thing to teach is that emotional content. That's the major fundamental difference I hear between the musicians coming out of the United States and the musicians over in Europe. They love us. They love what we do. They emulate us, and they emulate us oftentimes better than we play ourselves. And so when I was teaching over there, the questions were interesting. And the focus and the passion, they just want to do it. And when the American students come over there, when we played over there, it's kind of hard to put in perspective how these kids hear us and how they hear what we play when it's not theirs. Now, when we talk about symphonic music or classical music, oh, that's what they grew up with. And here's one more difference. I think, now this is all based on my experiences over there. The kids over there are taught from day one, like there's Mozart and there's Duke Ellington. They're not taught to separate. They're not taught that one is superior than the other, right? But over here in these States, I didn't hear Duke Ellington's name mentioned until I think I was in 9th or 10th grade. Think about that for a moment. Now, why is that? Is it because the teachers don't know? I'm not sure. It's a lot better now. It's a lot better now, but you know, I know a lot of you thought I was maybe 30 years old, but I'm not. But in my generation, jazz, the great jazz art, but I knew who Beethoven was when I was in 4th grade, right? Here we are, I'm an American, but I didn't hear anything about Count Basie, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Charlie Parker, Bill Evans, Stan Getz, Dizzy Gillespie. I didn't know, but I knew something about Beethoven, I knew something about Mozart, I knew, because that's what was taught. Even when I went to college, my first year in college over at Norfolk State, at that time there were great jazz professors there, Dr. Consuelo Moorhead, Dr. Burgess Gardner, some of these great jazz professors, and Dr. Georgia Ryder, who was the dean of the department at that time. But still, there was an emphasis on classical music. Now here I was in a predominantly African-American university. Why are they focusing on European music here? Because there was a belief that this is what we had to do to be accepted. And I disagreed with that, and it infuriated Dr. Ryder, but we later on became friends. I was a late student because I served my country out of high school. I went to the Navy. And so I was older by the time I went to school. And we had some interesting, fiery discussions, Dr. Ryder and myself, about this whole teaching process. But the jazz language is George Wein. How many of you have heard of the name George Wein? He's one of the great jazz producers, promoters. He once said that if it wasn't for Europe, there probably wouldn't be any jazz. Many of the great jazz artists like Dexter Gordon and Johnny Griffin and many, many others moved to Europe because over there just seemed to be more performance opportunities. And actually the musicians, most of the musicians play in Europe during the summer, not the States. I'm trying to change that, and I want other people to change that. Mr. Scott, you can help me change that. We're trying to bring, now, Congressman and I have had some great discussions about a lot of this history. But this is our music. Jazz is an American music. It was voted by Congress to be a national treasure. How many of you knew that? 7, okay, good, all right. But now more of you know that now, right? Maybe a couple hundred of you know that. Right? And so it's worthy of your support. And I ask people when they want to come into jazz, like, don't react to what you don't understand at first. Give it a chance, be patient. It's a language. Remember, look at it like it's a language that you may not understand, but you can appreciate its inflection. Now, there's some jazz you might like, there's some jazz you might understand. It's not important if you understand it. What's important, I'm not here, by the way. Excuse me? Hello? Just tell them I'm not here, okay? Tell her. She's like, why did you bring attention to me? I didn't bring attention to you, the phone did. But I ask that, how many of you listen to jazz sometimes and you're thinking to yourself, now be honest, wow, this sounds like a cat and a dog in a garbage can. Sounds like they're just going off over here and the drummer's doing this over here and then this horn player is screaming over there. I don't get this, right? Have you experienced it? When I was a musician, I wasn't a jazz musician, but when I first heard jazz, that's what it sounded like to me. And then I was fortunate enough to have somebody sit down and take me through the process of jazz. There's a method to the madness. You know, once you start to understand the roles of the instruments, like the bass walks, ba-doom, boom, boom, doom, boom, right? The drummers swing. Then there's the improvisation, that language. And it's it's like a big dialogue that we have. There's a method to this madness. You just have to take your time, learn, be patient, and some records I would recommend in closing. That's why you're looking at me here. Remember, you told me we were supposed to start at 8 o'clock, right? I was here at 8 o'clock, okay? I'm gonna get my time, my 25 minutes, all right? Some albums I would recommend in closing, like Miles Davis' Kind of Blue. The reason I would recommend that record, because it's accessible. Some of the greatest jazz musicians ever played it, but the music, it has a swinging, sophisticated quality to it. There's a comforting edge on that record. So it's a great record to introduce you to jazz, to get you into feeling swing beat. Now this is very different than smooth jazz, all right? I'm talking about jazz, okay? That's a whole different thing over there. Then Oliver Nelson's Blues and the Abstract Truth, fantastic record. Bill Evans' You Must Believe in Spring. There are records out there that can get you initiated into the sound, into the language of jazz. And the last thing I want to say, outside of, again, thanking you for having me come in and share some of my thoughts on this great music with you, I'm producing a major jazz series called the Phoebus Jazz Summer Music Series at the American Theater, July 13th and July 20th. Now, why am I telling you this outside of a shameless bit of promotion? Because the great Queen Esther Morrow will be on the bill on July 20th, and she's a Newport News native. Any of you familiar with her? If you're not, Duke Ellington discovered her, and she still lives here in Newport News, and I didn't even know that, and it was the Daily Press that actually pointed that out to me. So I contacted her people, and you know, she heard some of my music and what I do. She goes, Jay, I would love to come in, and we're gonna actually play together on that bill. And on the 13th, the explosive swinging pianist Cyrus Chestnut will be here. A young man that I taught when he was 15 years old at the Governor's Gifted Program, the extraordinary pianist that Quincy Jones eventually signed, the great Justin Coughlin will be there. One of the all-time great trumpeters, world-renowned trumpeter Randy Brecker will be there on the 13th. So it's going to be a smoking night of jazz. And then on the 20th, my 0 to 60 Jazz Quartet and Queen Esther Morrow. And tickets are on sale at Ticketmaster, so I hope to see you at the American Theater this night. Now, I hope that I was able to share some things with you that you found interesting or you may not have known about this great music. I host my Send It In Session jazz show. You listen to that jazz show? Yeah? It's okay. You can get, you know. Now you met me. Now you know what I look like. Now you'll never tune in again, right? But, you know, just have a sip when you're listening to me. The more you drink, the better I sound, right? But my show is heard Sunday afternoons from 1 until 5, Monday through Thursday evenings from 9 until 1, Saturday mornings from 1 until 5. It's been a blessing and an honor to be here to speak with you this morning. Thank you for having me, and God bless all of you. Thank you.